Welcome to Access Matters, where healthcare IT meets insight. I am your host, Jennifer Crawford. In our first episode, Ben Cassity with KLAS Research joins Access leaders Matt Hillery and Luka Salamunic to explore rebranding in the world of healthcare technology, the pros and cons, the challenges, and what success looks like. Welcome, Ben, Matt, and Luka. Let me first share a little bit about you for our audience. Ben Cassity, Research Director at KLAS Research, has a deep passion for making a difference in healthcare and helping to move the market in meaningful ways. He spent 20 years in commercial construction until a severe car accident caused him to question whether he was truly finding fulfillment. Around this time, his family went through 3 different surgeries in 6 weeks, all at the same hospital with widely varying experiences. The perspective he gained from those events led him to work at KLAS, where he found new purpose. Starting out, he focused on research in enterprise resource planning, revenue cycle, and healthcare operations. He now leads KLAS's research and strategy efforts in value-based care, data and analytics, archiving, and AI. Next, Matt Hillery leads digital strategy and the information management and governance solutions team for Access. He's a dynamic technology strategist with over 30 years of experience in enterprise software, professional services, and information management. Matt has served in key technical, management, and executive roles within large corporations and several technology startups. Prior to joining Access, Matt was the founding Chief Technology Officer for an industry-leading cloud-based information governance platform. Under his leadership, the platform was acquired by a global public company where he helped scale the technology across the customer base. And finally, Luka Salamunic is a software operator, entrepreneur, and investor with over a decade of experience across vertical software, healthcare, and finance. He led the acquisition of Triam in 2022 through a traditional search fund and guided its successful sale to Access Information Management in 2024. Today, Luka serves as Senior Vice President at Access, where he drives the company's healthcare software go-to-market strategy. Thank you, Ben, Matt, and Luka, for joining us on our first podcast. Let's get started. Ben, we'll begin with you. Healthcare tech companies are living in a world of constant evolution based on industry demands. As such, they may find themselves in a position to adjust their branding or even rebrand altogether. As a leader at KLAS, you probably see this pretty frequently in healthcare tech. What do you think is driving this?
Well, I'm going to say there's several reasons. The most obvious is there's a lot of mergers and acquisitions that are happening. There are companies that are looking to broaden their offerings. They are looking to merge for strategic and market positioning purposes. Other reasons outside of that would be a lack of resonance. You know, we've got messages in the market that maybe be a little stale.
As companies move into a rebrand, what are some of the challenges they should prepare for, and what are some best practices you've seen?
I'll start with probably landmines would be the biggest piece that we should discuss today. The 2 largest being, one, a lack of transparency around what they're ultimately trying to achieve and accomplish. The second would be assuming the industry and current clientele understand what the vision is. I've seen multiple situations, one I'm thinking of in particular, where you've got a company that will be really strong in KLAS rankings, and they bought a lower performing company. What was interesting here is, despite having that really great culture and despite being in a position where they could inject that culture into the newly acquired company and assets, there were some real challenges that came with regard to how they approached it. And when I say that, I'm saying this was right off COVID. They had withheld price increases for a certain amount of time, and then ultimately they buy this new company, and there were a lot of assumptions that everyone just understood the reasoning behind the acquisition. There was an assumption that the the clientele on both sides were just along for the ride. It turned into for a really great company, it turned into a lot of stress and a lot of damage control. Um, just simply because of the lack of transparency around the vision, and not to say roadmap is an entirely different conversation, but a lack of transparency around the vision and just making the assumption that everyone just understood, and they created for themselves a perfect storm to actually see a dip in customer satisfaction.
Matt, Access is currently going through its own rebrand. What has this been looking like for Triam?
It's a delicate balance. The story that Ben talks about resonates. You acquire a company, the company has goodwill with its customers, and you don't want to damage that goodwill. You do the acquisition because you believe that 1 + 1 = 3. But you need the customers, both your existing customers and the customers that you're acquiring, to go on that journey and join in on a shared vision of what, 1 + 1 = 3 looks like. So I think I agree. I think the best thing that you can do is try and be as transparent as possible about what your acquisition thesis is, and why you think it makes sense, and why it's going to be better for your customers. And that's what we try. I think that's what we're trying to do here at Access. Is explain what is good about the company, and what adding to the company means for everybody. All the participants, all the stakeholders in the deal. Everybody doesn't necessarily know going in what it means for them, and I agree. Like, you've got to really kind of put it out there what your intent is.
You mentioned earlier about mergers and acquisitions being drivers for a company to rebrand. And we know that combining internal cultures can also be an issue. Luka, I know the culture perspective is near and dear to you. What's your viewpoint on combining culture, and how is this being navigated with the Triam to Access rebranding?
Yeah, thanks. You're absolutely right. I think culture is everything in a rebrand. You can change a logo or a name overnight, but aligning people and values takes real work. Back there when at Triam, we had this highly entrepreneurial, mission-driven energy, small team, fast decisions, like a real sense of ownership with a lot of shareholders being employees. Joining a much larger organization like Access came with challenges, new processes, more layers of communication, the risk of people feeling they might lose their identity, so on and so forth. So we've been very intentional about not letting that happen. The biggest challenge, I believe, has been finding balance, preserving that agility and creativity that define Triam, while embracing the structure and scale that Access brings. And there were moments early on, I would say a year ago, when teams had different interpretations or priorities or ways of working, and we had to pause, communicate, and realign around shared values, which are transparency, accountability, and customer-first mindset. And all of those values came from our Triam values, as well as the Access ones, which are called Reach. Now a year in, I would say the process has made us stronger. We've kept the innovation and responsiveness that made Triam special, but now with the reach and stability of Access behind it. For me, that's what a healthy rebrand looks like, not erasing what worked, but evolving it. And culture doesn't really get rebranded, it gets carried forward, but it also evolves as organization scales.
To Ben, in addition to the cultural challenges as companies combine, I imagine change management within support structures is also a challenge. What have you seen as a successful approach?
I would say communication and follow through are absolutely key. It's very common for support structures to evolve as companies scale. And if communication is light and the structure changes, clients will be really quick to ultimately blame that change on whatever changes that you've made, the merger, the acquisition. On the other side of that, if implemented changes result in a noticeable change in how clients are used to receiving support, blame will go to the changes, the merger, the acquisition, whatever it is, that they will assign blame to what they see. I guess that's a long-winded way of saying if the why behind the support and the change in support and just the changes overall is not understood, if that vision behind that change is not articulated in a way that they can digest and understand and frankly repeated over and over and shouted from the rooftops, ultimately people will fill in the blank. There's a vacuum and they're going to fill it in with whatever they see, whatever they perceive. Their perception will become their reality. So there's a real need to drive that narrative and help people not just understand the why, but what does the future look like for me as an individual? And I do believe this ties back a little bit to the question about the internal culture. In the same way, if your internal culture is not aligned, the clients are going to feel that. We can see that in client satisfaction that it causes all kinds of nervousness around what the future looks like.
Certainly, companies embarking on a rebrand want to retain customer loyalty and trust. And from watching so many organizations go through a rebranding process, what are some more best practices to preserve trust and client loyalty? And Luka and Matt, feel free to weigh in on this as well.
And I'm probably going to sound like a broken record here. I'll boil it down to three. I'm going to say maybe similar thoughts, but the first is articulate the vision and the ultimate timeline that clients can see the expected results. You have to control the narrative. Leaving room for customers to fill in the gaps is a huge issue. Making the assumption that they just understand is always going to lead to negative perception. Paint the picture of what life is going to look like 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now. Features and functions are absolutely important. The reality is, if you don't help people connect on an emotional level with the vision, we're humans. We're emotional beings. They have to understand what life is going to look like for them. And if they don't, the features and functions are going to likely kind of slip into the back of their minds. They're not going to be feeling like they're along for the ride. The third is probably most important. Bring the existing customers along for the ride. Communicate again. And when you feel like you've communicated too much, communicate more. Assuming that everyone just gets it, do the air, that they just get it. And any assumptions that people just get it is going to ultimately lead to people filling in the blanks and client dissatisfaction.
As your organization grows, you spend, and particularly in an acquisition scenario or a merger scenario, you spend a lot of time internally working on the integration, working on the culture, working on keeping the trains running on time and growing the business. And you can lose sight of the customer's own journey, and that's why we all come to work in the morning. And I agree with what Ben's saying. You've really got to focus on over communicating. What's it going to be like to continue to work with us? What's the vision? I tend to think that you'll earn some grace if you're really forward about it. It's product development, right? You're always building and improving the product. You're never done. So it's more about the journey than it is waiting for some final destination.
And I totally agree with Matt. And just to add on top of that, based on my conversations with customers, it's been product development and roadmap. So where are we taking the product or the products and services and the vision? Will my counterparty change? So for the more tech-enabled companies, and specifically to some of our more migration services, are my counterparties going to be the same people I've been used to work with, or are they going to change? Something very tactical and human that they typically ask, will my price increase? So those are the most relevant short-term things that have to be addressed up front. And if they're properly addressed, probably set you up towards a successful integration in the first place.
Yeah, but I mean, Luka, I mean, just thinking about my own vendor experiences, the vendors that I've, worked that I've liked the most have always been the ones where I wanted to be that, champion. I wanted to be excited about what they were doing and that, the vendor that I could brag about and say, oh, we got these guys and they're doing a great job. And that really comes from understanding where they're headed. And also you feel like you have some stake in it. Like customers can adjust where the product goes, right? They have influence over the roadmap if the vendor's listening.
On a personal note, I see this with Apple. They're brilliant at this because they will not. There's a small subset of people that care about the aperture on the camera, the ability to actually zoom a certain amount. Where the rubber meets the road for those that are using these devices is, look at this picture I can take. Look at this video that I just created. Look at how this has made my life better. And in the same way, there is a focus for those developing the software on the individual features and functions. And the reality is, the human side of that, I just want to know what life looks like.
Yeah, I think so. Like getting back to the AI thing, like I'm not sure, there's that many people that we're talking to care exactly which BERT model we're using in the, records archiving product, or, how many GPUs it takes to retire some legacy system. But they do deeply care about how fast it is, how long it takes, and how accurate the model is. Like, it's the outcome that they care about.
Any closing thoughts while we wrap up?
What I see, I guess this is my challenge to providers at this point. One of the greatest barriers right now to adoption of AI or any other solution is actually the provider's reticence to adopt and to drive adoption internally.
Where can our listeners find you?
So you can find most of our data. Providers can actually access for free on KLASresearch.com. If you have any questions or just want to chat, benjamin.cassity@KLASresearch.com.
Okay, well, that's it for our first episode of Access Matters. A huge thank you to our guests, Ben Cassity, Matt Hillery, and Luka Salamunic for joining us today. For those of you listening, we would love to hear about your own rebranding experiences, so please drop your feedback in the comments. And if you liked today's conversation, it means a lot if you would give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and leave a review. And if you get a chance, please let us know what other topics you'd like to hear about by emailing us at podcastfeedback@accesscorp.com. Access Matters is produced by Mike Faber and executive produced by Megan McCord. Until next time, this is Jennifer Crawford with Access Matters.